this statistical lecture based on public health level 100 first time basically. Yes, so today we are going to touch on some basic terminologies in statistics and how it is related to the course that we are studying, right? So basically statistics is the collection and analyzation of data, raw facts and figures, and you are coming to make it sound relevant to what you are going to study, right? That's statistics. So when you collect data, you analyze and manipulate it, and you actually display it for it to make sense. Alright, so we have two kinds of statistics, right? So we have the inferential statistics and we have the descriptive statistics. So the descriptive statistics involves the charts, the pie charts, the mean, central tendencies, and co, right? So that one, it describes the data that you've collected. And the inferential statistics is about when you make the descriptive statistics, then you make theories, right? So you base on the descriptive statistics that you made to make informed choices. So without the descriptive statistics, there's no inferential statistics. You understand? So when I was explaining the statistics, I said data. So data is basically the raw facts and figures that you go and collect, the things that you collect from the statistics that you are going to do, or for things that you are going to study on. You understand? So we have sources of data. We have the primary source and the secondary source. The primary source is when the observer or the researcher goes onto the field to collect data through interview, focus group discussion. So they collect first-hand information. And we have the secondary data, which is already available. So you just go online, journals, books, and all those stuff. So you refer to the already existing literatures. That's the secondary data. You understand? So we have types of data too, which is the qualitative and the quantitative. The qualitative deals with texts, and the quantitative deals with numerals. Alright. So there's one conflicting thing about data and variable. We would explain that, but before I explain the variable in relation to data, we have to study, or we have to know what population is. So basically, when we say population, those that do geography, they will say that the total number of people living in a geographical area over a specific period of time. You understand? But this population in statistics is not that. Although the population in geography falls under the population in statistics. Population in statistics talks about all the entities that you are going to study. You understand? All the entities that you are going to study. So for example, if you are going to do a research on UDS, right? So all UDS students is the population. You understand? So apart from the population, we have sample. So you know that you can't, when you are going to collect data, you can't collect all the information from all students in UDS. So you result in sampling. Sampling is basically a proportion of all the entities that you are going to study. You understand? So maybe when you are going to do a survey on UDS students, so maybe you go to public health. So the Department of Public Health is the sample, and all UDS students is the population. You understand? And we have the other one, which is parameter. So from the data that you are going to collect, you have characteristic figures. So the characteristics of the population is the parameter. A characteristic of the population is the parameter. So for example, you are going to do a survey on the average height, on the height of all UDS students. So the height of all UDS students, the height is highlighted. The height of all UDS students is the parameter, and the all UDS students is the population. So the parameter is a subset of the population, but the main ingredient or the main key factor is what? The characteristic. Alright, the characteristic. And we have the statistic, not statistics, statistic. So statistic is also a characteristic nature of the sample. So when you come to public health, so the height of public health students. So we can see that public health students is the sample, and the characteristic nature of the public health students is the statistic. You understand? Okay, so let's come to the variables. When you go and collect data, they are raw facts and figures, right? So the variable is the characteristic nature of the data. So for example, you went to collect data, right, on height. So the data, you can have data, maybe the data of what? Uju, the data of Muhammad, the data of maybe Efia. So, and you have maybe 19 years, 16 years, 21 years, you understand? So this is what in level 100, level 300, level 200. So these things are the variables, and the overall information is the data, you understand? So the characteristic figure. So for example, you can have variables such as age, you can have variables such as what? Height, you understand? So under the variables, we have two forms of variables. We have the discrete variables and the continuous variables. So for the discrete variables, they are the variables that can be counted, you understand? They are variables that can be counted. So for example, you have age, you can count age, you understand? So they are variables that normally take whole numbers. So for you to know the difference between discrete and continuous variables, normally the discrete variables take whole numbers, but for the continuous variables, they can be measured. So for example, the height is a continuous variable, and normally they have decimals, you understand? So the difference, for you to know that this is a continuous variable, this is a discrete variable, the key difference is that one takes whole numbers and one takes what? Decimals, you understand? Alright, so earlier on I said data, right? And I spoke about the two types of data, which is the quantitative and the qualitative forms of data, right? So under the qualitative forms of data, the qualitative. Under the qualitative, we have nominal and ordinal. Nominal, and we have ordinal. So I earlier said that under the qualitative, they are all text. They don't involve numeral, right? Sorry, they don't involve numeral. They are all text, right? So any data that is in the form of text. So for example, levels, yes. So level 100, level 200, junior high school, senior high school. You understand? So those are qualitative data. So one of the qualitative data that we have, the nominal and ordinal. The only difference between the nominal and ordinal is that one is ordered and the other one is not. One is ordered and the other one is what? Is not. So for example, you can say that gender is not ordered. Male can come first, female can also come first. You understand? So gender falls under what? The nominal. It doesn't deal with order. It's straightforward. You understand? But for the ordinal, it deals with order. So you can have levels of education from kindergarten to basic to junior high to senior high to the tertiary level and the rest. You understand? So those are the nominal, the ordinal forms of data. You understand? Right. And we have the quantitative. So under the quantitative data, we have discrete data and we have continuous data. So discrete data is a form of data that can be counted. As I said earlier, it's just the same as the discrete variables, right? Because they are all variables. So they are data that can be counted. For example, the number of houses is a discrete data. The number of students is a discrete data. They can be counted. So normally they assume whole numbers, as I said earlier. But for the continuous, they are values or they are data that can be measured. So for example, you have height, weight, temperature, and all those stuff. They are continuous data. Okay, so that's it. So under the quantitative data, I earlier said that we have the continuous data and the discrete data. And I said that one can be measured and one can be counted. That is, the discrete can be counted and the continuous can be measured, right? So another scale of data is the ratio scale. The ratio scale. So we have the ratio scale and we have the interval scale. So these are forms of these are forms of the continuous data, right? They can be measured. They are under the measurements of scale. You understand? But the only difference is that one has true zero and one has no true zero. So the ratio has the true zero, true zero, and the interval has no true zero. Okay, so I'll explain. So basically, the overview of the ratio and interval is that they are scales of measurement that has equal, like, I wouldn't say interval, but they have equal measurements, right? The difference between the measurements are equal. You understand? So we can have 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. So the difference between 1.5 and 2.5 is what? 1. The difference between 2.5 and 3.5 is what? 1. So it follows. So the ratio and interval, they follow the same suit, but the only difference is that one has true zero and one has no true zero. One has true zero in the sense that ratio measures weight, right? So if they measure your weight, maybe a polythene bag and it's 0 kg, it means that it is indeed 0 kg, it has no weight, so it has a true zero. But for the interval, it's used to measure temperatures, right? So maybe in the case that you have 0 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius means what? Freezing. So it has a value. So if 0 has a value, it means that it's not a true 0. You understand? It's an impersonating 0, right? Yes. So that's it for the skills.